Money and Politics in Postbellum America, the U.S. Coinage Act of 1873, and John Jay Knox. This video explores the background of the U.S. Coinage Act of 1873, the transition to the U.S. gold standard, and the concept of bimetallism. It explains the key differences between bimetallism and the gold standard, examines the political and economic consequences of the act, and takes a look at John Jay Knox, the father of the Coinage Act, and finally considers any lasting effects the legislation may still have today. A brief background. John Jay Knox, then U.S. Deputy Comptroller of Currency, pioneered the legislation that would become the U.S. Coinage Act. Knox championed the concept that echoed technical reforms and ideological commitments to a gold-based monetary system. Unlike today's legislation, the bill was introduced and advertised out in the open. Yet despite this, it was still not widely understood by the general public and even fellow lawmakers. Once the law passed, silver was removed as an authorized coin. However, it would take years before issues with the bill manifested and eventually boiled over. This would be followed by economic hardship, which would further exacerbate these concerns, thus creating political discourse. From these issues, critics came up with the term crime of 73, or the crime of 1873. Bimetallism and the U.S. gold standard. Bimetallism and the gold standard represented opposing philosophies in the simplest and shortest terms. Bimetallism promoted inclusivity in the money supply, while gold prioritized monetary stability. While bimetallism could lead to inflation and inconsistent exchange rates, the gold standard often brought deflation and concentrated financial power. The concept of bimetallism. Bimetallism is a monetary system in which a country uses gold and silver as the legal tender at a fixed ratio. This approach aimed to expand the money supply and offer greater flexibility to the borrowers and common laborers. In 19th century America, bimetallism was popular among rural communities who felt squeezed by tight credit and falling prices. It became a rallying point for political movements advocating monetary reform. The transition to the U.S. gold standard. The passage of the Coinage Act would eliminate the silver dollar and place the U.S. on the gold standard. Unintentionally, the measure favored big banks and big businesses, coincidentally located mainly in the Northeast, while negatively impacting farmers, silver miners, and debtors, also coincidentally located in the South and West, thus causing resentment and discourse. Competing visions for the American economic growth. Industrialists and financiers supported the gold standard, viewing it as a means to attract foreign investment and build national credit. Meanwhile, small farmers and workers sought the inflationary policies through bimetallism. These tensions symbolize broader debates over the direction of American capitalism between concentrated wealth and grassroots empowerment. The economic and political consequences. The Coinage Act contributed to economic stagnation, particularly in the 1870s and 1880s. Deflationary pressures made debt harder to pay and stifled economic mobility. Politically, it helped fuel movements such as the Greenback Party and later Populist Party, both of which demanded for silver to come back. A controversial figure. John Jay Knox was the man who played a central role in shaping the Coinage Act of 1873. Knox drafted the bill's original version that ultimately removed the silver dollar from legal tender status. Knox was a staunch advocate for gold standard, believing it would bring long-term monetary stability to the United States. His 1874 book, United States Notes, defends the legislative shift, arguing that it aligned with international financial norms and curtailed inflationary threats from silver coinage. Despite his good intention, Knox faced considerable criticism in following years. Populist and free silver advocates accused him of orchestrating a financial coup that benefited creditors at the expense of ordinary Americans. The crime of 73 was frequently linked with his name in the late 1800s political rhetoric and newspapers. Nevertheless, historians today recognize Knox as the key architect of America's transition to monetary system, even though the actions and decisions sparked lasting controversy. Lasting effects of the legislation today. The legacy of the Coinage Act of 1803 continues in debates over central banking, inflation, and economic justice. It serves as a cautionary tale about the unintended consequences of monetary policy and risk of excluding large portions of the population from financial decisions, yet little to no evidence supports any residual impacts from the crime of 73 on today's economy or everyday Americans. This video aimed to explain the U.S. Coinage Act of 1873 and why it mattered. It looked at how the United States moved from using gold and silver, bimetallism, to relying mainly on gold, and it also explains what that economic shift meant. Hopefully those watching learned the key differences between bimetallism and the gold standard, how this change impacted Americans at this time, and John Knox, the man who could be credited with the creation of the Coinage Act of 1873. And finally, whether any part of this legislation, also known as Crime of 73, still really matters today.